Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Lesson 3 in Module 3, where we are going to be talking about what is zero. Now, I could go on and on with a bunch of historical nerdy stuff for a few of you guys that would really be into that. Hopefully all of us will at some point, about where zero was invented and counting systems and ancient civilizations who first developed the idea of zero. But if you want to know more about that, let's talk. Otherwise, let's get into these notes. So here is the first half. You can go ahead and copy that. And here is the second half. It's actually a pretty short set today. All right, let's jump right in. Now, the question we are going to seek to answer by the end of this lesson is, what role does zero have when we're talking about integers? So the answer to this isn't too complicated, and we've sort of touched on it in the two previous lessons, but zero is the midpoint. That's a very important word right there. Hopefully you can remember midpoint between positive and negative opposites. Okay, remember from the first lesson we talked about negative 3 and 3 being opposites because they are the same distance away from 0. Remember that? Okay. Also, 0 helps us indicate the context of the scenario. Okay, remember last lesson we talked about real life examples of these positive and negative integers. Usually when we are looking at that scenario, 0 will help us understand what's really going on in the real world. So the example that we're going to use here is I'm going to ask the question. I want you to identify what 0 means in each of these examples. Okay, that's a lot of what the classwork is going to be about when we start Lesson 3's classwork also. So let's take a look just at this first one. We'll zoom in real tight because that's all we really need to look at. We have, similar to our buddy from the last lesson, Jim. Jim's bank account. We have negative 100, that would be a real bummer for him, negative 50, 0, 50, and 100. Okay, obviously since we're talking about a bank account, these probably mean money, so you can imagine that there are dollar signs in front of each of these. Okay, so if this is talking about money, then the 0 represents when Jim has no money. All right, fortunately he's not on the negative side of things over here. But he certainly is not on the positive side of things over here. He just has $0. Okay, so this just means that, oops. This just means Jim has $0. Poor guy. Okay, now down here, it's not always about money. Okay, and I know money's kind of the first thing we go to when we're talking about math because it's easy for us to comprehend. But there are a lot of other positive and negative integers. Let's talk about elevation for a second. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but in Flagstaff, we sit at about 7,000 feet, roughly, give or take, depending on where you are in town. Now, 7,000 feet, you might ask, well, from what? 7,000 feet? Well, why couldn't that be 10,000 feet or 15,000 feet or 70,000 feet? Because when we measure elevation, this 7,000 feet references that we are 7,000 feet from sea level. Okay? So let's take a look at our example here and discuss what 0 means when we talk about elevation. Get rid of our Flagstaff example. Okay, so this example represents the elevation of a mountain. All right, here we have our number line. If you notice, our vertical number line because they can be vertical. Okay, and we see that these mountains, or at least the taller of the mountains, which is the one on the left, so this one here, sits at about 4,000 feet, and this smaller mountain here sits at just under 2,000 feet. Okay, notice there. Now, we want to know what this 0 is, right? So 0, whenever we're talking about elevation, refers to sea level. So 0 is when the elevation is sea level. All right, all around the world, the ocean sits at about the same elevation. That's where we measure from. Okay, that's pretty much all we have for this lesson. Just to recap, hopefully you now are able to answer, what role does 0 have with integers? It is the midpoint, and it helps us indicate the context of a scenario. So in Jim's case, we're talking about money. In the mountain case, we're talking about elevation. Anyway, hope that helps, and I will see you tomorrow where we are going to check these notes, make sure you got them. Have a wonderful night. Goodbye.